Touhou Project looks like this. So why the hell does its fanfiction look like this? For such a carefree series, the amount of sheer edge in some of its fanworks is honestly kind of insane, and maybe even more fascinating. Before we get into it though, a bit of context. Touhou Project is a video game series, blah blah blah, who cares? If you're clicking on this video, you probably know what's up. If you were just curious or you know me in real life, don't worry. Knowledge of the main series isn't really needed today. Unlike my previous videos, we're not talking about the official games or even any fan games. No, today's subject is fanfiction. A peculiar genre of fanfiction, one that's fascinated me for years. They're hard to define, but they have a very distinct flavor. Independent, minimally animated, hand-drawn series set in Touhou's setting where shit goes crazy! For now, we'll call them pizza cutter fanworks. All edge, no point. At least, that's their impression online. As prolific as this label is, I've rarely seen any real analysis of these works that aren't mostly summary or lighthearted memes. That's why we'll be dissecting these works today to see if there is any real point behind all of that edge. As much as I'd love to cover each and every last one of these, there's way too many for that to be feasible or even interesting. So I'll stick to my 3 favorites. I'll only be giving a recap of each series intro, so you can actually enjoy the rest of the series without just having some unemployed YouTuber babble away all of the interesting parts. Don't worry, I'll give timestamps in case you're already familiar, and I'll put links in the description to watch each of these for yourself. Still, they are really long, so if you're fine with the spoilers, you can just sit back and enjoy the ride. For now, it's time to get started with our first subject, Koichi Komeiji's heart-throbbing adventure. We open on what seems to be an average day for Koichi Komeiji, as, after consulting her friend Mr. Hat, she sets out to catch a fish as dinner for her and her sister. However, she runs into a problem. Where is she going to find a fishing rod? Luckily, the Scarlet Devil Mansion is nearby. Such a big place will almost surely have one. After convincing the gatekeeper to let her in, Koichi is almost given a fishing rod from the mansion's maid when someone interrupts. Flanders Scarlet, the Devil's sister, furious at Koichi for hurting her dear Mei Ling. Koichi is initially a nonchalant redhead, but as soon as Mr. Hat is hurt, she beats Flanders' ass, throws her out of the window, rips her wing off with her bare hands, and talks mad shit on her. Nigga. And just as she's about to make bait from Flanders' eye, Koichi is frozen in her tracks by a voice. It's not Remilia, you know, Flanders' sister and the owner of the mansion, but instead Koichi's own sister, Satori Komeiji. Koichi runs to her, overjoyed, only to be met with a sharp slap. Koichi, we're going home. That very abridged synopsis covers the first 3 parts of KKHDA, which I'm just gonna call Koidoki from now on. If you're interested, please check the link in the description and watch it yourself, and come back when you're done. Alright, all caught up? And before you ask, no, the final part of the final part is not out yet. Anyways, Koidoki is the story of the Moonlight Descent ceremony, a plot orchestrated by the Lunarians decades in advance with the singular goal of uniting mankind under a single collective consciousness. But it doesn't start out like that. As you just saw, it's initially just Koichi's fishing trip. Where I find Koidoki to be most fascinating is in the transition between the two, how the tight thread of Koichi's journey as the unwitting catalyst and witness to the ceremony begins to unravel into several disparate threads as it nears completion and intertwines once again for the finale. However, if you knew about Koidoki before watching, it's probably not for its central mystery or plot, but for just how traumatizing it is. This reputation is also so prevalent that many people simply write off the series as a pointless bloodbath, and many others seem to flinch at even a mention of its name. The reason for this trauma is something you've just seen: edge. Edge everywhere. From the art, to the story, to the music, just so much edge. It feels like not an episode goes by that someone doesn't horrifically die or get injured, even if the early ones really have to stretch to reach that. Now, look, I'm not going to completely condemn this show for the constant gore and occasional weird sex bit. I am a Black Souls fan after all. But hear me out, all the gore does serve a greater theme. Trust me. For one, the violence and madness causing it is the inciting incident and central focus of the plot. These characters aren't acting all edgy to serve a separate goal. Their edge is the problem some are trying to solve, and the means to others' ends. Because of this, you could say that all the gore in the series is more than just needed, it's the entire basis of the plot. On top of this, the series makes deliberate efforts to contrast the hopeless violence of the situation with the carefree, peaceful Gensokyo we're familiar with, adding an extra layer of tragedy to it all. Still, I think the series misses the mark a bit in making its edginess feel proper and important, and that's because it's lacking a lot of restraint. This can be seen pretty clearly in Sané's backstory in Part 7. Basically, Sané was constantly bullied for being WhatsApp, and her bullies go so far as to meet up in a huge crowd specifically to beat the shit out of her and attempt to gang rape her and later burn her house down because she's green. In response, Sané kills all of them. This flashback makes Sané realize the cycle of violence she's perpetuated, even in her final moments. That's cool and all, but I think it goes way overboard for what it's trying to say. Sané killed a ton of people in the past, then she just got better until the Moonlight Descent ceremony, and now she's back to killing people and locking up Kogasa in her BDSM sex dungeon for no reason, and then she just gets better once again after she remembers how she killed a bunch of people in the past. Doesn't make a lot of sense. That's not even to mention just how pointless this whole tangent is. The series just stops everything else to focus on Sané for one part, and one heckin' scary Kawakuma moment, before moving on and never mentioning or building on this backstory again. Suwako tries to make it into this deep thing like, violence begets violence. It's not your fault, Kogasa. That's just the way the world works. 11 parts after it happens, by the way. But my sister. Sané was literally about to cut her Achilles tendon in half. This is not some deep moral quandary. Compare this to Reizen's attempt to talk down Yorihime. While everyone else gears up for a fight, Reizen seems to see a unique opportunity. Having known Yorihime for much of her life, she understands her more compassionate side, aiming to appeal to her emotions. Reizen tells her all about her wonderful life in Gensokyo, from the people she's met to all the unique experiences she's had since leaving the moon. She encourages Yorihime to join her so that they can live together in this wonderful paradise. Yorihime, seemingly moved, has nothing to say except Reizen. For just a moment, you start to wonder if she's more than the single-minded killing machine Toyohime uses her as. That is until... you talk too much. See what I mean? Here, the gore is actually impactful and serves a greater purpose. Reizen's wide-eyed naivete is literally cut down by Yorihime's conviction, cementing the impossibility of negotiation. What's more, Yorihime's moment of hesitation seems to imply that Reizen's word did have some impact, but just not enough to truly reach her. Even though the edge is fairly short here, it's used perfectly to punctuate a dramatic scene. Now, you may be asking, okay, cool, but what about Koishi undressing while saying she wants to marry her sister? What are the narrative implications of that? Alright, you got me. Unlike the gore, I don't really have a defense for all the weird sex stuff. By my count, there were at least 5 notable scenes interrupted with this kind of stuff. Though there's nothing explicit, it certainly comes close. But you might be asking again, aren't you a Black Souls fan? Isn't that way worse in terms of this kind of stuff? Well, yes, but that discussion comes back to the idea of purpose. Silly as it may sound, the depraved actions Grimm has at his disposal are an important aspect of both gameplay and story. Here, there is absolutely zero reason for a lot of this content other than pure shock value, and sometimes not even that. The other thing you probably know Koidoki for is the art. It's practically a trademark of the series. Jagged, bold-lined, and somehow just as edgy as the plot. Near the start, the edgy kid vibes are simply immaculate. But with all the chibi-esque proportions, it's cute more often than it's scary. By contrast, the last few parts, while still very free in terms of design, the characters do have a tendency to get wide. They're a lot more solidly defined. Also, parts 11, 12, and half of 13 are in black and white for some reason. I don't know either. In general though, everyone gets pointier and taller as the series goes on. Well, except for Satori, I guess. It's honestly kind of boggling just how different the art becomes by the end. And while it is of much higher quality, I can't help but miss the earnest sketchiness of those early parts. The objective quality of the later parts lack a lot of the personality that made the series so appealing, at least to me. I know this is like discarding a 3-course restaurant meal for a hot dog on the ground outside, but I can't lie. I know you didn't ask, but for me, the best point in the series art-wise is around parts 6 to 10. That's where I think Sentaku-sen, the series creator, nailed the sweet spot between objective quality and personality-filled freedom. Still, the series came out over a 7-year time frame, which technically isn't even over yet, so it's a little unfair to ask an artist not to develop their style. Even more striking than that, though, is the music. For most of the series, the song choices are excellent, if somewhat unremarkable, but Sentaku-sen seems to know the absolutely perfect tracks to underscore gut-wrenching scenes. Whether it's Parade, Renai Circulation, or 20th Century Boy, they all elicit the same initial response of,
"Are you serious right now, bro?"
while the following scene seems to match it perfectly. At some points, the lyrics from the background song are even synced up with the dialogue from the characters. There's something simply spellbinding about hearing the chorus of Parade kick in after seeing Gensokyo as a whole go insane, or hearing the soft, overjoyed Renai Circulation as Koichi helplessly struggles against Yukari. I have to give a particular shout out to the use of Kick the Regret. The whole fight between Chirno and Star is just incredible. But the way the flashback with Dai and Chirno ends on that contradictory note and cuts to this discordant happiness has me somewhere between complete shock and complete investment. And right when you get used to it and think Chirno may have a chance as she freezes Star in place, it unexpectedly fades at a seemingly innocuous question. What's today's date? As Chirno struggles to remember the previous night, glimpses of memory continue the previous flashback, overwhelming her already exhausted mind. Finally, there's complete silence except for the sickening rip of flesh as Star cuts her leg free and stabs Chirno in the head. These moments of discordant harmony are unfortunately much rarer than you'd hope for, mainly due to Koidoki's narrative structure. In its contemporaries, story sections are typically followed through to completion before moving on. However, the story threads in Koidoki are slightly progressed all at once instead of story by story. It's not like we see the entirety of Star's journey and fight with Chirno unbroken in a part or two. Instead, we see Star going crazy around maybe part 8, most of the fight with Chirno including the part I highlighted around part 10, and that fight's actual conclusion in part 11. This trend, extrapolated to nearly every character and scene, is tantamount to excruciating narrative edging. Every time you're about to reach a climax, you're yanked away from the experience and redirected to something else. Truly CBT of the finest caliber. It's a prevalent issue throughout the whole series from the end of part 5 onwards, but this aspect really hurts with one character in particular, Koichi herself. After the first 3 parts, which tell a simple, continuous story, Koichi's endeavors are only given bit by bit among other crumbs. Koichi is revealed to be locked up deep in Chireiden in part 4, then she's shown geeking the fuck out and actually breaking out in part 5, then she meets Yukari in part 6, then she's killed by Yukari in part 8, then Yukari herself is killed in part 9, but Koichi somehow crawls into her body and takes control of her? If you want an explanation on that, you need to wait another 4 parts, by the way. Then Koichi and Yukari's body goes to the SDM in part 12, then the next time she actually does something is in part 19, 3 out of 9. And then she just vanishes until part 19, 8 out of 9. All of which, except for that final one, are supposed to take place right after each other. Those last 2 appearances are actually quite effective, and the cut in part 5 does become quite important later, but the rest are just exactly what I was talking about. Narrative edging. Right after every twist, Koishi's journey is halted while someone else takes center stage, only for their journey to be halted in turn, and so on ad nauseum. That's not to say I want this to be only Koishi all the time, but rather that the show could benefit immensely by focusing down on one plotline at a time. By far the most effective parts of Koidoki are when it finds a time to slow down and fully explore one of its plots. Sections like the Star and Shirno fight or part 19 8 out of 9 are so effective because they're so focused. If the fairy fight was split into 4 parts, each a few minutes long, or if it barely progressed while other stuff happened alongside it, any thematic weight would be precluded by the immediate thought of, wait, who's this? Oh, right, for the viewer. No matter how delicious, any dish will hardly be satisfying when you're only taking tiny nibbles at a time. Still, that's to assume it's followed to completion at all. Perhaps the most frustrating part of this narrative structure is when it seems to just forget certain things. For instance, Koishi constantly talks to her hat, yet it seems to be a third party, not always agreeing with her ideas. Of course, she's obviously schizo, but there may be more to this habit. That musing only grows in strength as she talks to Mr. Hat more and more. Boy, I can't wait to see the payoff to that. Anyways, you can apply this to plenty of other plot threads. Holy moly, Byakuren's crew is starting a project to completely wipe out humanity, and they're being raided by Marisa and Alice, and they are those fucking nukes. Hope you're not too invested in what could happen when a group hell-bent on wiping out humanity has access to a nuclear arsenal, because that's never followed up on. Almost as soon as it's revealed, the madness of the moon reaches its final stage, and the next time we see Byakuren, she's dead of old age? Even with, or maybe even because of this incomplete narrative, I think the show does an incredible job setting up its central mystery of the Moonlight Descent ceremony and its supporters. On a first watch, it's easy enough to assume that everyone's going insane just because the creator had a bad day at school, but as the show continues, that expectation begins to be subverted. First, it's with the nature of the madness itself. As we see with Sane, it's not just ooga booga, kill everyone, but it seems to be a more complex perversion of their ideals. We see this with Byakuren too. Once a proponent for equality, she now denounces democracy as oppression by the majority, not to mention the mechanically and logistically complex plan she concocts to wipe out humanity, except for some sex slaves of course. That, on top of the sudden onset and presence of accomplices, seems to suggest a level of intelligent design. But from who? The series continues with the outcome of the madness, dropping occasional hints like an oddly prominent moon, or Kawakuma's freak ass having 2 tongues. Though it seems like an incredibly open-ended question, the answer is a perfect fit. Who else but the Lunarians? An incredibly advanced species that has been shown to clash with the very ideals of Gensokyo in the past. Their plan is fittingly perfect. In order to merge the Earth and Moon and turn every living being into a collective consciousness, they must first create world peace. So, over many decades, they set about solving every worldly issue in the outside world. Of course, as a necessary part of their plan, they have spread the wonders of Moonrabbit Pussy throughout the entire outside world as well. Since Gensokyo is the land of the forgotten, all the chaos and destruction that left the outside world found its way into Gensokyo as a countermeasure. Once Gensokyo is annihilated after that point, world peace will have been achieved. Sounds interesting, right? A lot of themes here about the nature of peace and if mankind is destined to conflict and all that stuff. The build-up is very well done too. Even though part 11 is half recap, it serves more as a reorientation for what the viewer should focus on. With this knowledge, it's possible to figure out quite a bit from various clues. Raisin 2's presence indicates Lunarian involvement, while Kawakuma seems to be gathering the spirits of the dead, explaining one of the massive power sources Reimu and Yukari detected. Even beyond this, Raisin 2's presence in Chireden seems to indicate Satori, a sentiment only furthered by her killing Orin because she was bored and then aura farming. One of the most engaging parts of Koidoki was trying to piece this puzzle together myself. That's one undeniable benefit of the frequent cuts between scenes. New knowledge can constantly be applied to separate situations. It felt incredibly satisfying to remember Satori's indictment of Kawakuma or to notice the glowing moon behind Dai. Not quite enough to relieve the narrative edging, but still. That's why I was so disappointed to see much of this plot simply monologued by Eren while she T-poses. It's not only much more dry, but this predilection towards exposition makes unknown elements feel more like oversights, instead of additional pieces to the puzzle. For instance, Eren claims that storing the madness in the moon and sending down the rain of detoxification were countermeasures against the madness. Yet later in that same part, Toyohime has Eren's cures for the madness, and orders to keep the rain going in order to maintain our little killing monsters, even though the rain was made to do the exact opposite. I'm sure you can explain this with heavy speculation, but either way, it only distracts from the coming climax in the following part. Speaking of, that climax is incredible to watch for the first time, if very depressing. There's a huge melancholy behind watching these familiar characters struggle and fail time after time to stop the Lunarians. Despite this, these parts fall apart a bit on rewatch. You start to notice that almost all animation is simple editing effects like zooms and transforms. It's not a big deal, especially for an independent series, but it does detract from the action and tragedy that's meant to be the focus. This also brings me to a popular criticism of Koidoki, the strength of the characters. It seems hard to believe that in a world with people who are immortal to absolutely everything, people who can kill absolutely anyone except the immortal guys, people who can manipulate the boundaries between pretty much anything, people who can destroy literally anything, and a whole host of other insanely cracked characters, they could be completely wiped out by some moon homes. And the people with this critique are absolutely right. There is far too little justification as to why Yukari just lies there and lets herself get blown up twice and shot like a bajillion times, or how Yorahime dodges Flan's instant destruction, or how the Lunarians beat Moko's absolute immortality with the kill yourself Moko beam. When this trend of incredibly powerful characters being gutted for no reason is extrapolated to the whole series, you start to see any tension vanish bit by bit. Every character except the Lunarians and those afflicted with moon madness are nerfed into the ground, with their overpowered abilities I just mentioned either not existing or just not working. Meanwhile, the antagonists are all insanely cracked to the point where they can dodge instant destruction, counter complete immortality, and just recover from being cut in half. Abilities which are never elaborated on despite how much they're spammed. Even after the first couple parts, any viewer can predict the victor of a fight well in advance by whoever's more edgy, or just who's the Lunarians by the end. With only 2 fights ever coming close to subverting this, and the results of those fights being completely inconsequential. Every other time you'd think a regular person has a chance against an edgy one, either the fight is interrupted before it can reach its conclusion, or the edgy person just pulls out some brand new tech and completely no-diffs the other party. At some point, it feels like the whole series is made to just gas up the Lunarians with hype moments and aura, and if you don't like the Lunarians for whatever reason, this will just piss you off time after time. I'm not seriously angry that it's not 100% accurate to Zune-sama's vision, but when these fights have all the tension and drama of a TikTok edit, it's hard to get invested in any of them. Compare this to the early part of the series. Those scenes like Remy's talk with Reimu or her attempt to reconcile with Flander are very dry in terms of action. I feel they're far more substantial thematically. From these scenes, you can easily glean a whole whirlwind of differing motivations and setup for future plot points. How will Sidori deal with the danger her sister poses? Could she and Remy reconcile? From these questions, you can easily see where themes of what it means to love someone start to bloom. Themes that the rest of the series is wholly uninterested in. With such a straightforward plot, there's far more room for these characters to breathe and really think about what they've been through and what they're doing. Though a lot of the same Mary Sue problems are still present here, there's more to focus on than just who will win or survive. Meanwhile, a lot of the later parts of the series sort of feel like they're just trying to move the plot forward. The series rarely stops to think about any of the interesting ideas it brings up, always chugging along to the next before you know it. Character dynamics and thematic parallels are discarded to make way for the next plot beat, and those beats are discarded in turn for the next. Even with that, These sorts of grounded, thoughtful moments are where I start to doubt the whole pizza cutter label I gave the series prior. They're rare, especially as you get later on, but there are many moments from this series that have stuck with me in a way I can't really explain. Strangely enough, some of the most affecting scenes in the series are those between some of its weakest characters. That's why I feel that the final part, as of right now, is the most effective. Though it's merely a conversation between Koichi and Yukari, it's far more open to analysis than a lot of the more complex previous parts, especially when you don't have to worry about power scaling. While those previous parts were very interesting from a plot perspective, all the plates the story had to keep spinning distracted from the actual characters and themes. It's hard to come up with any solid takeaway with such a disjointed and scattered story, which is what leads many to discard the series as a whole as a pointless bloodfest. Without the looming mystery or Lunarian threat, these last two survivors are given the room to actually process the events preceding their current state. As such, it's one of the few times where a proper thematic clash can take place. Koichi, still living in the unconscious, seems completely unbothered, while Yukari is crashing the fuck out at her indifference. Her plea with Koichi to actually live her life, unpleasant emotions and all, maybe comes a bit too late to matter, but that only makes the decision all the more independent to Koichi. She has nothing to lose by remaining as she has for years now, but she seems to doubt if that's a life worth living at all. Through her memories of Kokoro and her other friends, she seems to decide in the end that regardless of her happiness, consciousness is worth the burden of pain, forcefully cutting her third eye open to see once more. Though this may seem like a hopeful ending, Yukari's tears after the exchange and Koichi being completely cooked after this seem to suggest that conscious living is incredibly difficult and painful. Boy, sure can't wait to see this arc conclude. Yeah, it's been nearly a full decade since the release of this part, and though we have seen hints towards part 19 9 out of 9's release date, that's still very far off. For now, and the past decade, we've been left to speculate and wonder over what the final part could be. In fact, multiple fan-made endings already exist, and while I could cover them, that's a bit too off-topic for now. Still, this thirst for closure is something felt by nearly every fan of the series. For as many hints towards greater themes and ideas that we get, they are very rarely actually followed up on. Sure, there's part 19 8 out of 9, as well as the Star and Chirno fight and most of part 7, but outside of that, there's very little in the way of full arcs. I did mention that the Edge was crucial to the plot, but this single-minded focus on the direct events is arguably Koidoki's biggest issue. As long as it's taken to release, it always feels like it's rushing you through to the next big fight or next big revelation, and by the time you reach the end, you realize how little substance you've been left with. Without the patience to slow down and explore each of its events and characters, Koidoki's lasting impression isn't far from what many initially thought of it, a pointless edge fest with nothing to say that shouldn't belong in a manifesto. However, you have to keep in mind just how much context we're missing when we watch and discuss this in current year. A lot has changed in the fandom in the decade or so since the series released. For example, remember that insanely edgy Sané backstory that seemed to just interrupt the story for no real reason? That's actually there to explain a fan interpretation of Sané's character around UFO, called Sadistic Sané. It's based off some dialogue from UFO or whatever. I don't care. Point is, this, at the time, popular background for the character has been completely discarded in the modern day, as Sané herself has been fleshed out, leaving this part as a relic of a bygone era. Even the treatment of the Watatsukis can be explained by this. Their first big appearance in Silent Sinner and Blue cemented them as a force to be reckoned with. Combine that with a fandom interested in power scaling, and the ridiculous Mary Sues of Koidoki are born. Once again, this element, something that would have been perfectly logical in the context of the early 2010s, has been dismantled by the 2020s with the fandom's loss of power scaling interest and presence of characters that can canonically beat Toyohime's ass. When you keep in mind how many layers of cultural separation there are across well over a decade and a language barrier, of course some parts aren't going to age the best. That said, I think it's incredible that something as unfinished and flawed as Koidoki could still give such a unique and engaging experience. As much as I've dogged on it in hindsight, I can't deny that it is an absolute blast to experience for that first watch. Both times I've seen it were almost complete binges in 1 or 2 sittings, and that kind of engagement is something that simply wouldn't happen if it really was just some madman's ramblings.
Stop.
Within All the Edge, there's glimmers of genuinely interesting storytelling that couldn't work without all of the blood and guts. That kind of freedom to grow into a moving work of art and still be messy, edgy, and full of loose ends is something only independent works can really accomplish, free from the financial stress and profit-based focus of commercial projects. Sure, the art is really edgy early on and not especially good, and there's tons of elements that were completely abandoned for seemingly no reason, and it's been left in agonizing one part away from completion for over a decade. But despite all of those flaws, and maybe even because of them, Koidoki is a creative ideal, a messy, uncompromised vision only possible from a singular creator. As much as I could sit here and poke holes into the plot until you get bored and watch something else, doing so would undermine the series' real value. After all, Koidoki is just as much a time capsule of its creator as it is its own independent work. Their shifting values, growing skill, music taste, and gradually widening ambition will all be permanently preserved in this simple story about Koichi Komeiji going fishing. And hey, if we can have so much to learn and discuss from this personal project, that's just the cherry on top. Then again, we live in the digital age, so it might be worth checking out the creator's other socials to see if there's any clearer hints towards the finale's release date. I swear this is worthwhile, and not just my obsession with cyberstalking everyone I make videos on. Anyways, Shintaku-sen has been mostly absent following the most recent part of Koidoki, but there actually seems to be signs of progress on the final part. Most recently, he's uploaded 3 YouTube shorts teasing part 19 9 out of 9. Now, those were also years ago, in March of 2024, but we also have an update that's a little bit more recent. Currently, his last post on Pixiv states that progress on part 19 9 out of 9 is currently at about 50%. So, when can we expect it? Well, he seems to have gone on hiatus for about 6 years, from May of 2018 to January of 2024, with this post being made in August of 2025. Assuming he started work on Koidoki right after coming back, which is an overestimate, that's a time span of about 20 months. So, that means we can expect it around April 2027? Keep in mind, this is pretty much all guesswork. There's no telling how fast Shintaku-sen is working, nor does it really matter. In terms of other stuff on his Pixiv, his other art ranges from kinda cool to kind of cute to kinda, the black and white thing seems to be a phase here too. Most notably, there's a separate mini-series called Furude Rika's Heart-Throbbing Adventure, which seems to be based on Higurashi When They Cry. Now, I've not played any Higurashi, so I have no idea what's the deal with Rika or this Hanyu fella she talks to, so this was all kinda in one ear and out the other. From what I could gather, Hanyu is a god that removes Rika's memories of the true culprit from each cycle, whatever that means. And thanks to some advice Rika gets from this blonde scalpel lady who has her tied up and naked, her solution is to take out a big old knife and cut off her scalp. Alright, pal. I'm sure for all you Higurashi heads out there, that was insane, but I really have nothing to say about it. What I can mention is that this work being in a comic format highlights something I hadn't really noticed about Shintaku-sen's work previously, the facial expressions. He's gotten really good at portraying exact emotions, from the smug reassurance of Satori to the almost bored indifference of Yukari, and it's something that makes the characterization of Koidoki shine, even when the plot's too busy to flesh them out. Outside of all that, there's just a lot of Koichi art. We're talking Koichi in a maid outfit with a plate of pancakes, Koichi carrying a lovely red purse, Koichi playing in a river, and Koichi getting eaten by a bear? Poor girl. There's some other stuff with the Watatsukis and some other fellas, but all in all, Shintaku-sen's online presence outside of Koidoki is honestly pretty normal. Moving away from the creator's online presence, let's talk about Koidoki's own fanworks. The series has been missing its final part for so long that the fanbase just got tired and made their own, multiple times. There's one where Okina pulls up, and there's this ridiculously long text-based one that I remember being really good, but man is it a doozy. I'll link the first part below if you're interested, but it's also been kinda animated by Drukkup. Only like the first 3 chapters though. Fair warning though, it is insanely long. TS is up to part 21, with it starting at 19.9 out of 9 and having well over a dozen chapters per part, on top of a whole dozen chapter interim and multiple intermissions. It's been an active-ish development for well over 4 years, and there's no telling if it or the original will actually be done first. If you're really fiending for an ending though, it's still probably your best bet. Outside of that, there's just some minor fan-made stuff, like a few memes.
You're a fucking ugly bitch. I want to stab you to death, and then play around with your blood.
And a few edits.
Who are you? You're not me. There's just no way. I'd never do the kind of things that you've been doing. Oh, spare me. Just stop it. Why are you acting like the part of me that I hate? I wish it would just go away.
But by far the most popular Koidoki fanwork is this remake of Part 6's opening done by Pear. This is for good reason too. It does an incredible job maintaining Koidoki's jagged art style through movement. It's absolute peak, but you've probably already seen it. That's where I plan to end this little sidebar, but I recently discovered a remake of Koidoki called Koishi Komeji's Super Exciting Adventure, which I'm gonna call Koi Super for consistency. The basic premise seems to be Koidoki without any of the edge, which surprisingly makes it really good. Without the whole mass insanity or Moonlight Descent ceremony to worry about, Koi Super is actually able to delve into all of the plot threads Koidoki was too busy to address. So far, this is manifested through Remy and Flan's relationship. In Koidoki, Remy went from expressing her desire to let Flan out more, right back to saying she's locked up for her own good. And that's pretty much where their relationship ends. Meanwhile, Koi Super actually takes the time for Remy to learn and grow as a person, giving her the courage to put away her image as the head of the family to focus on those important to her. Despite the cute art style, Koi Super is actually far more mature than his progenitor. That's not to say the edge was the problem with Koidoki, just that the series was far too willing to rush through its own character's development. Koi Super, as well as most fan content surrounding Koidoki, seems to be made in the West, though plenty of fan art has been made from Japanese creators too. In fact, Koidoki's biggest Japanese fanwork is actually our next subject. It's reached a similar status as Koidoki, often being cited as the second pillar of Toho psychological horror. The series' name is Toho Igyokyo, not Grotesque Land Story. That was just made up by some translators. It's not official, even though it's on the sub YouTube titles. But whatever, just play the thing. Today is one of the Hakurei Shrine's most joyous traditions, a banquet. Though the attendance is smaller than usual, this banquet has attracted some unusual guests. Remilia Scarlet for one, and everyone's favorite Toho character, Kana Aberal. Among the usual attendees of Marisa and Suika, oddly enough, the host herself seems to be missing. After a lengthy wait, the group notices a familiar red and white outfit approaching the shrine, though she seems to be a little different than normal, not bothering to greet anyone as she stalks towards the shrine. Suika runs up and gives her a big hug, only to be met with 3 massive needles through the skull. As Reimu looks at the group, she reveals a hideous visage of black and white, joined together with an inhumanly vertical line of teeth. After no diffing Kana, because literally what else do you think would happen, and somehow dodging Remilia's Gungnir, you know, the spear that never misses, and sniping her only Sakuya and Marisa are left to fight whatever this is. At Sakuya's behest, Marisa takes Remilia and flies off to the Scarlet Devil Mansion, leaving the maid to buy enough time for the two to reach there safely. All across Gensokyo, similar deformed creatures, and a plane, are wreaking havoc on the once peaceful land. Any attempts at resistance seem to be instantly crushed, almost like this is some kinda Grotesque Land Story? Anyways, that covers Gyokyo's prologue. You know the deal. Links in the description. Come back when you're done, or stick around if you a baller. Alright, ready? Right off the bat, you can already see the parallels with Koidoki. Beloved character turns evil and kills a bunch of people for no reason, and then everyone else goes crazy. We got hundreds of those back on DeviantArt. I'll admit, with the monochrome aesthetic and sometimes overly sketchy art style, Gyokyo doesn't do itself too many favors right away. The comments on the prologue certainly seem to suggest so. But under that outward layer of inspiration lies a far more complex and nuanced story, and I think the first route does an excellent job displaying this. It highlights Marisa delivering Remy to the Scarlet Devil Mansion, but she and the viewer both quickly find out how outmatched she is against these invaders. If this was Koidoki, we would see a short clip of her running into Daiusei but huge before cutting away to something else, with her fate left ambiguous but probably not very good. Instead, we follow Marisa's entire pilgrimage in one unbroken narrative, which is the case for every character, as they each have their own route. This is not only much easier to follow, but it's also far more effective at building tension. After seeing how cracked that monstrous Reimu was, watching an entire organized squad of these creatures surround Marisa in her house, while her mind races to come up with a plan for all of them, is an incredibly effective tone setter for the coming fight. At this turn, much like nearly every tense scene in this and Koidoki, you expect Marisa to get completely mollywopped, but she actually uses her established magic from Canon Toho to clip the entire group, and spoiler, she and Remilia actually reach the Scarlet Devil Mansion. With this ending for Marisa's route, you might expect the entire series to follow this more hopeful note, but those dreams are dashed as soon as you see Sakuya, not do so well. It's in these unknown fates where I find Gyokyo to be the strongest in terms of raw plot. Sure, you can guess at some of the fine details from other routes, but for the most part you have no idea what's gonna happen to each character. Sometimes franchise mainstays are just completely absent or confirmed to have died long before their route, but other times you'll see people you expected to quickly die last far longer than you'd imagine. This aspect is shown best in the OCs. Despite the deep cuts the series makes with well-established Toho characters, it also includes plenty of all original ones. My favorites in this field are the fairies who pull up for Cirno's route. There's maybe a bit too many of them, but I found myself far more invested in their plight than I expected. With Cirno being completely cooked for like half of each part, their characterization is put front and center. I particularly like the Black Tea Fairy. I know, crazy. She's initially a complete bum, but as the fairy's numbers are whittled down bit by bit, she's forced to take responsibility for Cirno. By proxy, she is their last hope. That only makes it all the more hopeless when you see her stumble upon V Marisa. We'll get into this MF later, don't worry. But her unrelenting power puts the Tea Fairy at a point of absolute helplessness. Flashes of her deceased friends fill her mind, telling her to grow some courage and actually fight, but she's just too much of a pussy. She grovels and begs V Marisa to just spare Cirno, not even thinking about how Cirno would get revived without someone to take her. After being set free for some reason between pity and boredom, she finally finds the life-saving ice she needs to revive Cirno. Cornered by monsters and at her wit's end, she takes her final moments to do something she was always too timid to actually accomplish. Tell someone her name. Tina Flavor. And then she gets shot in the head 4 times. See what I mean? The story got insane mileage out of someone who is practically a background gag character completely made up for the series. In just a few parts, you can grasp a history of someone trying to be assertive, yet always being drowned out by their own timidity. This level of depth is rare enough to see in fanworks of near ubiquitous characters like Marisa, yet here it's expertly woven into a wider plot involving Cirno. Speaking of those near ubiquitous characters, I want to talk about how Gyokyo expands on pre-established canon. Remember way back in the intro when I said knowledge of the main series wasn't really needed? That's technically true here, but for those with sufficient background knowledge, this series is an absolute buffet of callbacks and references. Take Alice for instance. She's one of the few characters to appear in both the PC-98 and Windows series of games, yet she seems to have drastically aged between the two, especially compared to Reimu and Marisa. This is pretty much an afterthought to the vast, vast majority of even seasoned Toho fans who have other priorities when it comes to Alice. Yet here it's expertly woven into both prior fan interpretations of Alice and the series' own lore. See, Alice didn't just suddenly have a growth spurt. Instead, a mysterious woman with a cross in her hand gave her a grimoire full of incredibly powerful spells. Her reasoning behind this was so Alice could grow up quickly in order to marry Marisa, whose bravado and personality were endlessly appealing to her young mind. The only caveat to this magic is that invoking the spell requires the sacrifice of a child, and Alice's baby sister just so happens to be in the perfect place to fill that role. Now, if you're new to Toho, that may just seem like an incredibly dark backstory, but veterans will recognize just how many tie-ins there were to the main series. Alice's mother is Shinki, the final boss of Mystic Square. Marisa saved Alice in her fight with Luis, the stage 2 boss of the same game. The grimoire Alice receives is the Grimoire of Alice, the same thing she uses in Mystic Square's extra stage, and even the woman who hands Alice the book is the cover girl from ZUN's album Dolls in Pseudo Paradise. These references aren't just there to make you point at the screen and go, I know that thing! These stories recontextualize canon Toho in different and more importantly, interesting ways. With this background, Alice shifts from her reclusive but ultimately kind self to a deeply disturbed person, desperately trying to manufacture the family she threw away. The series uses the dark headcanon it's created to create equally compelling character drama. Another aspect of canon Alice is that her career goal has been to create a fully autonomous doll, which Gyokyo exemplifies through Shanghai. By bringing up both of these tensions, the series raises tons of engaging questions that it actually takes the time to answer. Has Alice changed since then? With all her time raising Shanghai, is she now willing to put her family over her love life? She may answer yes in the moment, or actually she doesn't, never mind. But it remains to be seen if she'll maintain these values when her resolve is actually tested. I can go on and on about this, from Rumia hiding away her insane power to Flanders' relationship with Koichi. These adjustments to canon aren't always so deep, but they're pretty much always intriguing. Yeah, there's no real reason for Kawakuma to have 50 different guns and a tank under her dress, but it's pretty awesome. Not to mention the unique fighting style it gives her in comparison to Mei Ling, Cirno, Flander, and pretty much every other character. Speaking of, those fights are always a blast to experience. Even with the minimal animation, the music and sound effects go a long way to creating dynamic movement. Despite assuming a fairly deep level of background knowledge, the series still goes to great lengths to establish powers and abilities early in a fight, so random ass pulls are fairly minimal. That plot I was talking about earlier helps a lot here as well. It's far more engaging to watch a fight when you can't be sure of the victor compared to one-sided raffle stomps where the scales are almost always at extremes. This ambiguity is present even with Moko, one of the few characters confirmed to be unkillable no matter what. Unlike Koidoki, Moko hasn't been nerfed to the ground, nor does anyone pull out the Moko Killer 9000, but that doesn't mean she's unstoppable. That's one of the many reasons I found her route to be the best, or at least my favorite. Parts 2 and 3 are especially peak. Part 2 probably has some of the most tonal whiplash in the series, with it starting off on a very grim note. Moko's fighting a variant of Keine, a Were Hakutaku with the ability to manipulate history. After it stops her arm from regenerating, it reveals that it's here to free Moko from the curse of immortality. Moko, having been cursed with bearing her sins for all of eternity, seems to be willing to accept this. That is, until Tei intervenes, reminding Moko of what she has to live for. This split second is all she needs to get the upper hand against Keine. Even afterwards though, a hint of regret shows itself in Moko's tears, with this chance almost certainly never appearing again for the eternity she has left to live. Anyways, right after this, they find some dog that completely snipes Tei. Bleeding out, she begs Moko to save everyone in A and Tei. Moko agrees to her dying wish, and out of gratitude, Tei stands right up and comes with her. And A and Tei are my second favorite characters in the series, the Moon Rabbit variants. For some reason, they all talk in broken English instead of the Japanese used everywhere else. I can't explain why, but after 4 hours of constant depression and gore, stuff like end of conversation had me absolutely cackling. And that's not all. While Moko's doing that, Tei is getting chased down by this massive variant of Ringo, which is suddenly interrupted by... for no reason. Or how about Variant Raisin spending the whole part solving a Rubik's Cube before saying, yeah, it's complete, and throwing it onto a previously off-screen pile of cubes while Psychosocial by Slipknot blares in the back. Absolute cinema. I can go on and on about Moko's sheer helplessness despite her immortality, and the glimmers of hope throughout the route, or how Patchouli interrupts the ending by just... But I've had enough of that YouTuber thing of just recapping the series. Come back for more of that in about 3 minutes and 16 seconds. For now I want to talk about the main antagonists, Igyokyo itself, translated as the far less cool Variant Town. These variants of Toho characters, much like the originals, have widely varying abilities, power levels, and even anatomy. Variant Yuka is a complete bitch. I mean, she's the head of a massive plant growth, while V Notori is... Notori is a... Shut up! V Notori is just a fighter jet who blasts Candid Friend every time it shows up, which is pretty funny once you notice it. Regardless, the designs are all incredibly well done, managing to be creepy in an insanely varied amount of ways. From V Alice's dead doll eyes to V Sane's, everything. We'll get to her later too, don't worry. Their frequent presence next to the originals is also incredibly effective at providing subtle commentary. Take the 3 mischievous fairies. With the power to camouflage, muffle their sounds, and detect any nearby presence, they should be completely safe, but they're torn apart by their own selfishness. Sunny ties the other 2 up as bait, while Star takes the first chance she gets to assert power over Luna. Meanwhile, their variants actually function as an excellent team. V Star identifies targets, V Sunny is an incredibly quick attacker, and V Luna is a more stealthy force. What's more, they actually stick together throughout their fights, serving as a stark contrast to the manipulative and cowardly originals. They're not all home runs though. V Yuka's whole sadism bit goes on for a bit too long and is a bit too freaky to be written off as just part of her character, not to mention you have to watch it twice, and V Remilia's design is just kind of ridiculous. Like, I don't think I can show this on YouTube, kind of ridiculous. Also, not all of these variants are such expert perversions of their originals. Unless I'm missing something, I don't see how the Aki sisters could translate to these bugs that roll around like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh no 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 no! Oh no! Oh no! He ate him! He ate him! He ate him!
One underappreciated aspect of these bums I really like is that a lot of them draw from fandom interpretations of their originals. Yuka, in the absence of any game appearances, has been reduced to flowers and sadism. Oh, and massive tits, of course. So her variant is those 2 maximized. You probably don't know who Ellie is, but you do know her stage theme. So her variant condemns you to the bad apple dimension. This is especially effective when you consider how relatively deep and nuanced the original characters are. There's far more time spent delving into their personalities, values, hopes, and dreams than you would expect. Outside of just making you care about them, this depth is very effective at turning these variants into proper perversions of their original, instead of just an evil, messed up version of medicine I drew in my chemistry notebook. Because of this character depth, Igyokyo excels at creating incredibly memorable moments. There's just something inexplicably fascinating about watching the carefree Rumiya suddenly stumble across a withered grave, the name barely visible as Yukari inexplicably appears behind her, reminiscing of the girl who warned her of the apocalypse, before seeming to disappear as quickly as she showed up. No matter who it may be, Igyokyo has this strange ability to make you completely invested in their plight. Especially when compared to Koidoki, there's far more patience present in the narrative. Sure, we may only have faint glimpses into Igyokyo's ultimate plan, but the series is content to focus on the actual people affected by that plot instead of just using them like figurines to move it forward. In doing so, Igyokyo is not only far more coherent to watch, but far more open to speculation. With Koidoki, the story kind of falls apart the more you read into it. You start noticing more and more completely discarded characters and themes, as well as scenes that are pointless in hindsight or just never had a chance to happen. What's worse, the series expects you to know its characters in advance while disregarding their canon abilities and power level, leading to an experience that's frustrating for veterans and incomprehensible for newcomers. Meanwhile, Igyoko's more thought out plot only rewards those who pay attention and possess background knowledge, not only allowing analysis to enhance the work, but making that analysis incredibly satisfying. Perhaps no character exemplifies this better than V. Marisa, who is far and away my favorite character in the series. Her design is literally just Marisa doing a Shane Dawson cosplay, but she serves as such a fun yet terrifying character that she's endlessly entertaining to watch and speculate about. Marisa's two biggest traits in the fandom are stealing a lot and getting the most pussy out of anyone in the franchise. Now, that second aspect hasn't really manifested yet, but the first makes her the second most OP character in the entire series. See, while her power hasn't been fully explained, it seems that V. Marisa can steal any power she sees, without even needing to fight the owner. Probably, don't quote me on that. That means freezing bullets, transforming into a very silly looking golem, making a sun, and pretty much infinite regeneration are all fair game. What's more, she's smart. Even Flander, the one who can destroy anything in an instant by closing her palm, is defeated when V. Marisa just cuts her arms right off. This combination of terrifying power and a sharp mind gives V. Marisa such an insane aura. Every encounter with her brings a palpable tension, as no one she meets leaves unscathed, and most of them fucking die. It's especially bad when you hear this song kick in, a harsh, discordant remix of Magus Night that's just as much a death march as a character theme. Though we haven't seen a whole lot of her, she's by far the character I'm most interested in going forward. Through her schemes, we're shown so much of Igyoko's society and hierarchy without it feeling like direct exposition. This loud-ass song, seriously, can we get something nicer? Thanks. Highlights another really effective aspect of Igyoko, the horror. Ooh. Now, when you hear that, you might start thinking about all the blood and guts that have been on screen, but that's not actually what I mean. That stuff is only really helpful for establishing stakes and punctuating bigger moments. Unlike Koidoki, the violence and ensuing madness are much more a consequence of the variants than the actual cause itself. Those variants are the main sources of actual spooky stuff. Well, okay, outside of a couple especially nasty designs, most of the horror comes from a single one of these guys, Variant Sané. V Sané, outside of being one lanky MF, is probably the most busted character in the series. See, her ability works like a curse. When you attack one of her followers, or sometimes just because, the curse passes on like a virus. Now, what does it actually do? Yeah, it basically puts you in a Sané-themed cock and ball torture device until you either A,
kill yourself. I mean that with 100%, with 1,000%.
Or B, pass it on to someone else. Somehow. Outside of everything happening to those afflicted with Sané sickness, the part I find most affecting is the sheer hopelessness of it all. When you see even V Marisa being scared of her ability, seeing anyone transported to a high school is practically a death sentence, even for nearly immortal people like Flander and Moko. What makes it even scarier is just how little you really know about V Sané. There's no telling how much of a range she has on her ability, so she might not even be in Gensokyo while causing all of this. Not to mention the doubt she casts onto one of the biggest lore drops in the series, which is when Patchouli locks up the bug. Even outside of Sané Curry over here, the series is incredible at instilling dread, fear, and just plain bad vibes on a regular basis. Whether it be Mei Ling running into an MF she should not be messing with, or Alice just tweaking out in a forest, these vibes are immaculate time after time, with the art and sounds working in perfect harmony to create that icky feeling of ugh. I have to give particular props to the flashback in Alice Route 3. Even among all the blood and guts in this and Koidoki, Alice murdering her baby sister is still absolutely sickening. with the audio triggering some panic sector of my brain I never knew was there. The way it's contrasted with Alice ripping apart her imaginary bear friend, her only voice of reason through her madness, also does an incredible job highlighting her arc. The scene hammers into your mind that these are the two lowest points of Alice's life. The 2 times she has sacrificed her loved ones to chase some unreciprocated pipe dream. And that's a message that wouldn't be half as effective without the edge. Even the bear transforming into Alice for this scene makes her collapse all the more obvious, literally tearing apart her own conscience. These small details are something you can notice nearly everywhere in the series, and they make it immensely satisfying to rewatch. From Marisa finding the body of someone who dies in Chirno's route, to Alice's arm being riddled with pricks from every time she's had to return from Wonderland. They're not even always restricted to the series itself either. Koishi's strange appearance is a direct homage to Koidoki, the series that inspired Igokyo itself. I already mentioned how many of the variants are based off their fandom interpretations, but V Marisa in particular also has a bit more to her. She seems to be based heavily on this Misagi Kamigawa guy from some Medica Box manga. It seems random, but they actually have a fair bit of overlap in their abilities. The screws she uses against Mei Ling are the same things Misogi uses as part of his attacks, and her ability to prevent Mei Ling from ignoring the wounds from those screws are the inverse of Misogi's All Fiction, which allows him to undo damage instead of solidify it like V Marisa. Even V Marisa's seeming immortality seems to be based off of Misogi's unlimited tenacity, which stems from him losing to everyone at everything. V Marisa's attack of Super Marisa World is also a reference to, you're not gonna believe this, Super Marisa World, a popular fan game. Finally, that I remember, her strange line that Mei Ling should be wearing a swimsuit and dancing in front of the gate is likely a reference to these weird series of videos called Electronic Wind Instrument that features Toho girls in swimsuits playing their theme on a clarinet or something. I don't know either. I don't say this all just to flex on how little I go outside. These references all serve to make the series all the more personal to its creator, Sushihiro Toro. I mentioned Koidoki being an uncompromised vision earlier, but that aspect is at full blast here. From the recognizable art style, to the music choice, to the highly specific references and jokes, to even the reliance on cool monster designs, Igokyo could come from no other creator. In a fandom, and really whole internet, that can sometimes feel homogenous, this unbarred personality is a breath of fresh air. This is made much harder to notice though, by the translation. With Koidoki, the translation wasn't always perfect, but you could, understand what was happening and what was being said. Meanwhile, Igokyo's subtitles were mainly done using textractors and machine translators like DeepL, which leads to many lines being mistranslated or just left out entirely. Then again, my dumbass would not be watching this series if these translators hadn't stepped up, so I guess I can't really complain. What I can complain about is the extra commentary. Every so often, the translator will add in little reactions or speculations to the plot like they're in a movie theater. Yes, I see the big scary face behind Mei Ling. Yup, it's probably not good. Yeah, that sure is. They're pretty funny on this rewatch, but it's just kind of silly and distracting. I don't mean to be a complete hater though. One thing I actually really like is that one of these translators, th_Koishi, actually colors in significant moments. And it's done so well, I thought it was part of the official series. Anyways, I think it's incredible how strongly the series' core themes shine through regardless of this language barrier. For every Sakuya who gets completely cooked before she could do much of anything, there's a Chirno or a Moko, someone faced with a crisis picking themselves up time after time for a reason they themselves don't yet know. With these strong, evocative character moments, Igokyo seems to actually have something to say about the nature of a society in crisis. This prospective theme is only strengthened by its nuance. While some are willing to fight tooth and nail for their future, others stake their lives for those they love, and others still cheat and manipulate to get any edge they can. This overarching theme is what makes me far less critical of all the unknown elements in the plot. As much as we don't know, there's a strong enough foundation that I believe it will lead to a satisfying and fulfilling arc. While characters like Kana, V Marisa, and the Jacket Girl are very mysterious, there's enough there to be sure of a clear intent for their future. And the creator has stated in interviews that the entire story is already written out. That's not to mention just how much of the series is left. There's about 11 routes left to be fleshed out, which is monumental in comparison to the one part left in Koidoki. This brings me to a recent realization I've had about these kinds of series. See, it always used to confuse me when people complained about these series because of their edge, since there's tons of critically acclaimed works that rely on similar depictions of violence and other disturbing topics. Rather than this content itself being the issue, I think these complaints stem more from the lack of anything else to focus on. In Koidoki, for instance, any poignant moments are not only rare, but bookended by far more attention-grabbing scenes of raw shock value. Meanwhile, while Igokyo is far more intense in terms of violence, its emotional moments are given the same level of intensity. You can see this clearly in Moko's route, or Yuka and Rumio's route, or Chirno's route like I covered earlier, and so on. Because its story has been planned out in advance, Igokyo has the patience and foresight to give its plot a more balanced dynamic between the action or plot focused bits and the character drama that makes us care about that plot. Still, what's most reassuring about this series is its creator. Some of you may have recognized the art style for Igokyo as belonging to one Sushihiro Toro, the same creator of the Black Souls series. Now, I'm not about to jump into a whole sidebar on Black Souls lore, that's maybe a topic for another day, but suffice to say, it's a series renowned for its story. Outside the actual meat of the story, by far the best parts were the endings. I ain't about to spoil them, but they did an absolutely incredible job of tying together what seemed to be a very disparate story. With Black Souls 2 especially, the final chapter added so much in the way of characterization and sheer peak that it completely shifted my opinion on the game. When applied to a series that doesn't have to work around gameplay, I have very little doubt in the story's future success. Toro's games also explain the massive hiatuses and quality jumps between entries, especially between the last few entries of the latest routes. See, the majority of the series released years before Black Souls 1, while these few came out during the rollout of Black Souls 2 and its DLC. Let's just say those have a lot of drawings, so a quality jump makes a lot of sense. As for the hiatuses, the current one is the longest ever, but still only half of Koidoki's. Unlike Sentaku-sen though, Toro has been very active online during this hiatus. Looking at his Pixiv, most of the content is far more relevant to a Black Souls fan than a fan of Igokyo, but that content is still present if you look back far enough. What's interesting from these is that you can tell a lot of these designs have been cooking for a long time. Like, check out this early Demon King or V Moko. His most recent stuff is pretty much all Black Souls except for your occasional Koishi or V Marisa. Now, I'd love to delve into all of this stuff like these magazine covers or just how freaking awesome the DLC key art looks, but that's not relevant. Just, if you see the lizard, remember that's a guy. But beyond that, there's actually quite a lot here for fans of Igokyo, and it's not all stuff like Koishi being burned in a brazen bull. Koishi is mainly getting hurt in different ways, like almost drowning or getting her ass kicked by Red Hood. There's also a cosplay made of V Reimu for Rei Taisai. Pretty freaky. The most meaty thing on his Twitter, at least Toho related, seems to be these bios he's made for many of the variants. There's actually quite a lot of extra lore details here, from information on the Demon King herself and her 13 Knights, to just some additional context and clean art. For instance, it seems that V Marisa's ability to steal powers comes from V Alice, or how about V Racen apparently being able to dominate the 5 senses, or this really scary drawing of V Sane. She was also apparently pushed off a roof 3 times in high school, and that's why she's like that. The last scraps of official Igokyo content I could find were this, whatever this is. And a full comic detailing Igokyo's fight with a different Gensokyo, with entirely new variants, or I think they're called Phantoms. They look pretty sick, but it's not canon, so I don't give a gap. It also seems that, much like Sentaku-sen, Toriyori is also a big Koishi fan, and actually a big fan of Koidoki itself. His banner on Twitter is from the opening to Koidoki Part 6, and he writes that it's from his idol Sentaku-sen-san. I mentioned it earlier, but an interview with Toro reveals that Koidoki was actually the primary influence for Gyokyo's existence at all. Outside of some extra little stuff, it's about all I could glean from Toriyori's socials, at least relating to Toho. It's far more engaging to explore as a Black Souls fan. Speaking of, that's where most of his effort seems to be pointed now. Not Black Souls specifically, but some kind of spin-off called Dead Red Hood. From what I've seen, it looks like it's shaping up to be pretty peak. The art has perfected that sketchy, almost rough-looking style so that it maintains its grit while actually being understandable. The story and gameplay actually seem really interesting, breaking away from Black Souls' JRPG style to focus more on assassination and stealth. And it also has Yuri. Hooray! There also seem to be over 200 CGs planned for the full release. Keep in mind that Black Souls 2 only had about 117 CGs in its base game. Even with the DLC, I doubt that goes over 200, so Dead Red Hood is almost guaranteed to have far more content story-wise. Oh wait, this video's about Toho. Sorry about that, I'm still looking for Alice. This game is set to release in 2026, so Gyokyo may continue after that point. If it does, the art is going to be absolutely bonkers, so I greatly look forward to it. If you were a silly little baka, you would probably think that Koidoki was the much more popular work in Japan as well as the West. I thought so too at first, but the fandom for the series is surprisingly large, and fanworks are not only more prolific, but more expansive as well. Take this series, Toho Gensogo, Deep Fantasy Town. A whole other work clearly inspired by Gyokyo. Or how about this awesome flipnote animation of Chirno Route 5? Or this intro that suddenly... Or this, I really don't know what's going on here.
And your judgments interest me not. For I'm here to reclaim what is rightfully mine.
Or this short where, for whatever reason, V. Marisa decides to have a bunny girl party with the rabbit variants, some non-rabbit variants, and Vernai and Vorpal from Black Souls. This is an actual hidden gem. I can't believe I almost missed it. There's also some Friday Night Funkin' mod. This is not a gem, this is coal. Sorry, I just don't care about Friday Night Funkin'. A surprising amount of the fan stuff I found was hand-drawn too. People have even been making their own entire routes, some based on sparse hints from Toro and others wholly original. I'm sure you see by now, regardless of their obscurity to us normies, these series have both found massive popularity online. Regardless of how complete they are, both of these series have become absolutely iconic for Toho. There's a reason references to fishing rods and that weird, messed up Koishi are so common even today. For many of us young Toho fans, because, I'll be honest, a lot of the people watching Koidoki and Gyokyo are children, in case the comments didn't already tip you off to that. These series represented something wholly unique from the wholesome Gensokyo we all came to love. All of the edge was just so exciting, not in a freaky way, that we hardly noticed the plot holes. Regardless of how pointless it may be, the shock value in these series is undeniably effective. I wouldn't be out here writing nearly 30 pages of script for these series if that wasn't the case. Watched at the right time, the violence really sticks with you in a strange, morbidly fascinating kid with unrestricted internet access kind of way. In addition, they're the springboards for their creators' careers. It's doubtful that Toro would have the experience necessary to create Black Souls, or that Sentaku-sen could fully mature in his art style without those awkward early episodes. Is it really so bad that years detached from their release they start to show some flaws? Much like my previous video subject, these flaws are mere growing pains. Still, this is sounding an awful lot like a conclusion, and if you remember in the intro, I did say I would talk about my 3 favorites, and we're only at 2. Well, keep in mind the 2 series we've already discussed. One had a decent balance of edge and overarching mystery, while one had a lot more of a direct, edgy plot while being lighter on the mystery. In addition, both were started while the artists were very early on in their careers, and neither of them have been finished. So what if there was a series with a third option that was mainly focused on the mystery with a sprinkle of edge? What if it was made by an experienced artist? And what if it actually finished? Worry not, there's a solution for you. In fact, it's today's next subject, Murder in Pseudo Paradise. Today is another ordinary day at Suzunan, the human village's most popular bookstore. The proprietress, Kozuzu Motori, sorts through her catalog before spotting an unusual book on the shelf. Kozuzu can't remember anything about it, and its blank pages offer no further clue. After consulting her friend Hieda no Akyu, who is also stumped despite her eidetic memory, Kozuzu visits the Scarlet Devil Mansion, seeking the help of the mansion's owner and her librarian. Petruli reveals a strange riddle, which you can pause to read in full, but the group is quickly distracted by Flander, who drags Remilia away to play hide-and-seek, though they don't return for quite a long time. When Kozuzu goes to investigate, she discovers why. Remilia has been decapitated, and her sister is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Kozuzu's mysterious grimoire manifests a doll, visible only to her, and draws a smoky mist from Remilia's body. With this, a new page of her grimoire is filled, being a written confession to the sin of being Quirius, already signed in Remilia's own blood. The doll seems to have sealed away Remilia's regenerative ability, leaving her soul in limbo and leaving Kozuzu to work out all the questions she's been confronted with. What is up with this doll? Can Kozuzu save the potential future victims? What is Flander smoking? And can I have some? Find out next time on Murder in Pseudo Paradise. You get it, okay? That's part 1. I know I mentioned watching the series before this video for the previous 2 topics, but I mean it here. The way Murder in Pseudo Paradise expands and contracts, with just enough clues to guide you towards the solution and just as many red herrings to throw you off, is just incredible to see for yourself. However, it also uses a ton of deep cuts into Toho. As a quick test, can you tell me who this is? If not, a lot of the series might fly over your head. That's not to say it won't be enjoyable, you just might be even more lost than someone with the proper background. Because of this mystery, the spoilers I reveal in my review, though nothing major, will be a lot more impactful than say Igokyo or Koidoki. There, the mystery is more so a backdrop to all the crazy stuff going on elsewhere. Well, more so for Igokyo. But here, it's integral to experience. I don't want to ruin one of my favorite fan-made Toho experiences, so this is your last spoiler warning. Alright, what'd you think? Pretty confusing, right? That's what I think is one of the best parts of Murder in Pseudo Paradise. That sense of being embroiled in a mystery larger than you could imagine. There's so many moving parts, from Jacket Co and Dolls in Pseudo Paradise to the wider plot of the main antagonist, that trying to piece it all together just makes your head spin. More than that feeling though, what really makes the mystery special is that solutions do exist for almost all the questions a viewer would have. Why is the culprit specifically targeting stage 6 bosses from past incidents? Why is the culprit so hell-bent on spreading Dolls in Pseudo Paradise throughout Gensokyo? Where is Flander? What's with this note about geometry? The answers to each of these questions intertwine with each other to create an immensely satisfying web of mystery. This presence of a solution to every problem helps a lot when it comes to properly immersing yourself in the story. Kozuzu's struggles to find a culprit feel deeply relatable to your own efforts, and this immersion helps a lot in getting the viewer to root for her through every deduction, both right and wrong. That's the value of not having an all-powerful super genius as a protagonist. It's especially helpful that the series even has one singular protagonist to begin with. With Igokyo and Koidoki, the scattered plot threads make it hard to really attach yourself to any single one. Well, except for Chirno, oddly enough. Even with Igokyo's more focused structure, you're rarely given complete closure for any character, again, except for Chirno, let alone the overall plot. With Murder in Pseudo Paradise's laser focus on its mystery, every detail feels like a crucial part of either the culprit's plot or an attempt to conceal it. By attuning the viewer to all of these small details, it's far more reasonable to figure out, say, who poisoned Kaneko, or who the hooded figure with the new body is far before they're actually revealed. To prove this, look no further than the comments. When it comes to its contemporaries, a lot of the comments are simple gut reactions or surface level observations. Meanwhile, Murder in Pseudo Paradise's comments are full of people actually engaged in the mystery, pointing out important clues and making active strides in the riddle or search for the culprit. That alone speaks volumes to how effective the setup to Murder in Pseudo Paradise's mystery really is. This conditioned penchant for detail is supported by the art. Stylized yet clear, its apparent simplicity masks expert level design. With such freeform expressions, the creator Don Juan's art style lets you clock entire personalities with a single glance. From Reimu's reluctant indifference to Satori's sickly gaze to Marisa's shifty eyes, even the appearance of the characters seems to foreshadow their future roles. Even outside of the wider context, the art is just really nice to look at. It has the same quality as Toro's later art, where it's just inexplicably captivating. Don Juan gives characters like Satori so much sheer aura that she still has her smug, self-assured grin even when crucified, a detail that's more important than you may think. That art is also extremely helpful when it comes to Murder in Pseudo Paradise's scarce edgy moments. In the first half or so of the series, an outlined group of 8 victims are all horrifically murdered one by one. However, this isn't where that plotline ends. Rather, these murders are all crucial aspects of the culprit's plan, and their methodology is also important to tie into an extremely niche piece of Toho content, as is the appearance of Jacketko and the misspelled signing of certain sins within her little book. The way certain victims are beheaded while others are crucified and others still are poisoned not only keeps each murder fresh and interesting, but complicates the mystery even further. Even that niche Toho content's obscurity is important to the plot, but I won't say how just yet. By making its edgy components a crucial part of the story while having them serve a greater purpose, Murder in Pseudo Paradise is excellent at incorporating its edge naturally into the story. In fact, I almost considered it to not be edgy enough for this video despite all the gruesome death. This scarce, purposeful edge does wonders for the stakes of the series. Whereas Koidoki and Igyokyo desensitize you to all the gore fairly quick, Murder in Pseudo Paradise keeps the value to its shock while actually having something to say after it has your attention. This meticulous design in nearly every aspect of the series makes it endlessly rewarding to watch and re-watch, with every new viewing bringing up something new you may have missed. Say, why are the sins in the book always misspelled? Why does each episode that includes a murder use a track from Gustav Holst's The Planets? When you realize that there's 8 victims and 8 songs in the collection, the gears in your brain start to turn. Add in that the first part of the riddle in the first episode had 8 parts, and then things get really interesting. Or how about Kozuzu's head ornaments? They're almost always bells, but every so often they seem to change into yellow eyes. This seems pretty random, until you remember the one who warned Kozuzu not to spread the story of Dolls in Pseudo Paradise. Yukari, a yokai who can easily spy on Kozuzu, and someone who has yellow eyes. This kind of stuff is present nearly everywhere, but what truly elevates it is how it isn't all for the viewer's benefit. For every triangle with 0 height, there's a suspicious coffee or byakuren, clues that seem to point to an obvious solution that really only lead you astray. On top of keeping you consistently engaged with the mystery without making it too clear, all of these disparate pieces only make it all the more satisfying to see the full puzzle put together. I will say, that full puzzle isn't always the easiest to understand at first. In particular, the first explanation of world programming and the initial reveal of the true culprits were a little mind-bending, but in a good way. With further thought, these explanations are logical, which is an absolute necessity for any good mystery. If you aren't willing to engage with it though, these reveals will just kind of feel like yap sessions. In fact, compared to Koidoki, and especially Igyokyo, Murder in Pseudo Paradise borders on a visual novel. That said, the series' setup and payoff makes it hard to avoid being swept up in the mystery yourself. This visual novel-esque nature is something I didn't even notice until editing, since what was being said was just so engaging. With all of this talk about an intricate and complex mystery, you may get the impression that Murder in Pseudo Paradise is some super serious series, only for those with a high enough IQ to understand Rick and Morty. I mean, how long has it been since I've put some stupid memes in here? This perception is far from reality though. More than either other series we've discussed today, I feel Murder in Pseudo Paradise is the best at balancing tone. For as much as it sets up its overarching mystery, the series has plenty of levity to balance it all out. This is made clear as soon as Pachuli's first reaction to the grimoires to blow it up beat the shit out of it, and then throw it in Remy's face in order to ascertain its magical barrier. Or when Yuyuko's haunting warning to Kozuzu is interrupted by Miko's morning aerobics routine, with the Yukari serenading the viewer in song, with that Yukari being a key player and one of the final unravelings of the mystery. These kinds of diversions may seem to be only distracting lol so random gags, but what I find really impressive is how integral many of these moments are to the overarching narrative. Take Miko's aerobics routine. This seems to be completely pointless until you realize that the culprit is recreating the story of Dolls in Pseudo Paradise. With this context, Miko is marked as the early riser, who is the second to last thief to die, yet she is shown last in the OP, while everyone else is shown in their proper order. I wonder what's up with that? And me saying that Yukari is a key player in the climax wasn't just a joke. Or how about Satori's impromptu dance party in front of Eren's clinic? Once again, it seems like just an excuse to show off more awesome music, but the extra detail of the moving plants on the side is more important than it may seem. And to balance this out, there's also plenty of details that just aren't important, like Yomu absolutely blazing it out of stress. By presenting all of these scattered clues, important and misleading, direct and indirect, Murder in Pseudo Paradise is excellent at creating a mystery that you could theoretically solve if there weren't so many meddling figures. Putting yourself in the shoes of Kozuzu herself, lost in a world of information and misinformation. With the knowledge of the ending, the entire series is expertly recontextualized so that every red herring and obvious in hindsight clue is made clear. However, I can't guarantee you'll be able to fully understand every twist and turn, and that's because of the series' insanely deep cuts into Touhou lore. I mentioned it after the intro, but I think it's time to delve more into that. If you're interested in the series, I'd recommend stopping the video here and watching it, as the rest of this video will include some decent spoilers. Or you can just skip to this timestamp where spoilers are done, or you can just full ball, I don't care. Take the first half or so of the series, the part that directly follows the story of Dolls in Pseudo Paradise. If you're like me, you would have never heard of this before. It's actually an official album released by ZUN, with the version released at Komiket 62 creating a story about 8 thieves who die one after another, with the final thief committing suicide. This story is crucial to working out the initial plan of the culprit, as the current victims mirror the fates of the 8 thieves. If you aren't aware of this story, you'll be completely lost in those early episodes while Kozuzu and Alice babble about some Horai revolution. Despite this, I find this use of outside knowledge to not be so bad. The series does outline the story of Dolls in Pseudo Paradise fairly early, so everyone is caught up to speed soon enough. The more notable use of required knowledge is when the series begins to center around PC-98 canon, which, in case you're not aware, were the first 5 Touhou games named for the PC-9800 series of computers they were made for. Except for kind of Mima and Yuka, the characters from these games have been all but forgotten by the wider community. Though it's foreshadowed with Satori's files, the sudden appearance of so many new characters can still be a huge shock. Seeing people like Gengetsu, Mugetsu, and Shinki just show up, like they're in one of those smiling friends with my OC, let me know if they're too noticeable.
Alright, Glip, this is very important. We can't screw this up.
Don't worry, guys, it's easy. You're not gonna screw it up.
Videos can feel very jarring when the earlier parts of the series were so focused. I don't exaggerate when I say that some of these plot points are insanely obscure Touhou knowledge. The Shanghai Alice Ensemble, the ones who initially performed Dolls in Pseudo Paradise, are based off of characters ZUN drew in his blog. The red Chiuri soul Yumemi talks about is Chiuri's alternate outfit from Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream, which is only revealed to be its own character at the end of Chiuri's route. It doesn't help that, outside of Kozuzu and sorta Akyu, the first part of the series used mainly popular characters. Still, while the shift can be jarring, the obscurity of these characters is very much the point. Without explaining the whole series, the culprit's goal is to revive these characters who had faded into obscurity. In this sense, a lack of outside knowledge merely provides a different perspective. Instead of, whoa, he's going back to PC-98? This plot point feels like the emergence of some ancient unknown figures, which is very much the culprit's goal. In fact, that obscurity is crucial to one of the series' core themes. Again, I won't spoil the ending or any other huge plot points, but the culprits are acting out of a sense of nostalgia, trying to bring back long forgotten figures of the past. Even Satori's motivation of having more stories to tell Koichi extends off of this idea of stories and legends. I can't say much more without big spoilers, but I just wanted to plant this seed of a theme for when you watch this yourself. Even when it comes to Murder in Pseudo Paradise's own prequel, Wheelchair Detective Satori, the two are still very separate stories. You might be missing a lot of context, like why is Koichi in a coma? What's with this weird Shanghai doll that calls itself Roid Magata? Why is Satori in a wheelchair? But it's far from necessary to enjoy the series. I still absolutely recommend watching Wheelchair Detective Satori and its case files, the latter of which is a bit of an epilogue to Murder in Pseudo Paradise, but those are reviews for another time. Maybe. I don't know. Probably not. Murder in Pseudo Paradise is also excellent at messing with the viewer's expectations. Take episode 9, for instance. Here, Kozuzu boldly declares that she knows for a fact who the culprit is, directly calling out Byakuren Hijiri as the sole culprit behind the incident. Of course, Byakuren doesn't take this sitting down, boldly proclaiming her own innocence while poking holes in Kozuzu's flawed logic. Just kidding, she actually kills herself. But not before recording her own karaoke session as a final will and testament. This actually follows a trend established in Donwan's previous work, that being that the culprit always breaks out into song once they're caught. By having Byakuren do the same, the viewer is lulled into the same false sense of security as Kozuzu in this moment. Oh, and by the way, don't worry about Byakuren, she gets better. That part actually brings up one of my favorite parts of the series. The music videos. At least once per episode, Donwan graces us with a specialized MV. As silly as they get, they all contain crucial hints towards the story. I have to give special props to the first intro, Sexy Sexy. The lyrics are a little odd, as the title would imply, but the vibes are simply immaculate. Watching those stark character designs be replaced with grotesque mutilations as the series goes on is incredibly affecting, not to mention how it draws important parallels to Dolls in Pseudo Paradise. Though some details aren't as important as others, Label Co is featured in many of these, yet she never shows up, they're always a joy to watch. This is especially helped by the music choice, which is absolutely peak. From the eerie vibe of Sweet Blossom and Flowers to the evocative hype of the world, the series never fails to reinvent itself time after time. Also, Kozuzu always seems to be running in them for some reason. In fact, some of the music is so fire that it gets the series taken off of YouTube for copyright infringement. From what I've seen, it's only happened with one song, but that song had made the translations of Murder in Pseudo Paradise Part 4 and Wheelchair Detective Satori Part 3 unavailable on YouTube until a couple months ago, which definitely sucks. Still, these losses wouldn't be so significant if not for the incredible translation work done by Morio Salesman. In a set of series so focused around riddles and subtle clues and dialogue, his translations have made it incredibly accessible for foreigners to understand and follow these riddles. Take the first part of the Murder in Pseudo Paradise riddle. While most of the instructions simply read obtain, a few have specific instructions like twist or lay down, which are crucial to actually solving the location of the first key. If it weren't for a translator with so much attention to detail, these key components would go completely over most viewers' heads. His translations also help a lot with characterization and comedy too. Rather than strict word-for-word interpretations, he uses context and the character's personality to make the shift between languages feel incredibly natural. He's also translated a lot of other hand-drawn series, so if you're a fan, I'll link his channel below. As much as I love Murder in Pseudo Paradise, I can't in good faith say it's an airtight story. There's plenty of plot threads and clues that don't seem to be direct indicators or red herrings. I know I showed it before, but Label Co is in multiple intros, and she does absolutely nothing in either series. Or how about Kozuzu's own arc? Satori tells her something about needing to be prepared to become a true detective or whatever, and Kozuzu seems to take her words to heart. In episode 14, she even seems to take on Satori's own smug grimace, and her speech at the end seems to imply that she's become emotionally detached. However, this arc is contrasted with Kozuzu's role as an innocent witness to the culprit's scheme, destined to see every step without the ability to stop it. As is, both sides of her are somewhat developed, but neither is really brought to its conclusion, nor is the tension really mentioned in a significant way. This could be set up for her role in a future Donwan series, but it's a little disappointing nonetheless. Then again, These are very minor nitpicks in comparison to some of the issues with our other two subjects. Murder in Pseudo Paradise is nowhere near as visually messy and incomprehensible as Gyokyo, nor as capricious with its own plot as Koidoki. In fact, its skillful composition is exactly why I've had far less to say about it than those two. Any more would be giving away massive spoilers to a story that really deserves to be experienced blind. I don't want that somewhat unfulfilled arc to detract from the insane quality the ending has, especially with how expertly it recontextualizes the rest of the series. Even the fact that the series actually has a conclusion is simply incredible after the incomplete narratives we just saw. While Gyokyo and Koidoki are probably gonna peak when they're finished, with Murder in Pseudo Paradise we don't need to wait. All of the peak is right in front of us. Seeing its amazing conclusion is why I was so disappointed to see Gyokyo and Koidoki be unfinished. With that level of growth and that talent, they could be insanely good stories that move beyond the label of edgy Toho fanfiction. Murder in Pseudo Paradise proves that. This excellence makes more sense with the context of Danwon's career, who has the most expansive, well, Toho-related, pedigree of these three creators. If you remember the part of Murder in Pseudo Paradise where Kozuzu talks about a bunch of previous incidents involving PC98 fellas, that wasn't just random yabber. Those are actually Danwon's previous series, which you can see on his Nico Nico. As far as I know, they're not translated at all, but hey, if you know Japanese and you love Toho, here's your call to action. It's a ton of stuff in a similar vein to Murder in Pseudo Paradise and Wheelchair Detective Satori. Stories set in Gensokyo that use a mix of fandom interpretation and canon deep cuts to craft wholly unique stories, though his past work seems to center a lot more on PC98. Oh, probably. Not like I can read him. From what I've seen, his art style used to be a lot different, and not just in the man this used to suck kind of way. The sharp designs and line work we saw in Murder in Pseudo Paradise are a lot less exaggerated here. If you're interested, I do really recommend checking out his Nico Nico, since he has been in this business for a long time, since about 2009, and unlike Sentaku-san, he hasn't really had many huge hiatuses I can see. As much as I appreciate his dedication, I can't say much about the actual work itself, mainly because it's all untranslated, and I don't just want to point and say, your art used to suck, and now it don't. Despite my efforts to move forward anyways, these works are simply incomprehensible to those at my power level. His longest series seems to be something involving the Cthulhu mythos, where the only Toho characters are Renko, Mamizu, and Jakiko, and the whole thing is voiced by the Yukari voice, which, I'ma be real, got grading after like 5 minutes. Apparently it's supposed to be a tabletop RPG, assuming that's what TRPG means, but for the life of me, I cannot understand what's going on. His latest upload is about 15 minutes of continued driving, commentated by two far less grating voices, which is also a series of his. I don't mean any hate. This is just a huge departure from what he was doing previously. To be honest, it's kinda cozy just watching this road trip while the white noise of incomprehensible conversation plays through my ears. Since writing this, I've actually grown to adore these videos. They're not just driving footage. They're whole mini tour videos of various locations around Ishikawa, and that kinda cozy feeling has turned into a really comfy dynamic. His actual latest upload is this same format, but just applied to a walk, and it's just as relaxing. The majority of his recent uploads use these voice banks, and while they're completely detached from Toho, they've still got an undeniable sense of quaint endearment. Also, I forgot to mention this, but Danwon is actually working on a sequel to Murder in Pseudo Paradise, focused on reviving a certain someone who died in that series. It's still untranslated, and it seems to be on hiatus, so who knows. I'll probably watch it when a translation comes out. There's a lot more I can cover, including some comics about Maribel being pregnant, and an R18 comic featuring that one T-Rex arm Satori from SA. Those are both locked behind a prohibitive paywall of 100 yen though, so my broke ass is not about to read these. I guess the mysterious lore of dolls in her uterus will remain a secret for now. To be honest, Danwon has so much content under his belt that he could use a dedicated video of his own. There is just too much to cover here. Aside from all the previous series I mentioned, remember that Cthulhu one specifically? It's actually a bunch of D&D campaigns played by Renko, Mamizu, President Eric from Seiho Project, and C22 from Project Blank. Oh, and Jakiko is the game master. And the Cthulhu part comes from the bosses that sometimes show up. Don't ask what any of that means, it's for another time. Here's where I would usually add a quick sidebar about tertiary works, but to be honest I haven't been able to find very much fan content for the series, well, aside this one drawing from Toro, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. Rather, it's a sign of Murder in Pseudo Paradise's completeness. It tells a full story from start to finish, with very few loose ends for fans to tie up. That, and it's very light on original characters. It's an unfortunate consequence, but I don't think it speaks to any fault on the series' part. If anything, it's a sign of how well it fits into Toho's established canon. While those elements may be unique to Murder in Pseudo Paradise, its excellence certainly isn't. We've spent, an hour and a half talking about edgy fanfiction, and that edgy fanfiction ended up being really good. From iconic staples of the fandom, to intriguing expansions on niche lore, to an exhilarating mystery, we've had quite a bit to see from just edgy fanfiction. What's more, I've only scratched the surface with these three. There's of course tangential series like Wheelchair Detective Satori, but there's also wholly separate series I just didn't have the time to get into. What about Osana Reimu, or Boundary Girl Raising Project, or Sex Alice? Or countless other untranslated or just unknown works of pure passion. Even if those don't all fit the mold I described back at the beginning, it's simply amazing that so many independent series exist to begin with. This is a phenomenon I've only really seen so widespread elsewhere with Undertale, but even then the vast majority of projects don't go beyond one-offs or concept art. While Toho's fandom has run the whole gambit from full-length fan games to web animations to TV shows and beyond. Outside of the wider scale of the fandom, I think it's fascinating to witness the individual growth that Toho has fostered. All of the creators we've talked about have had their work become nigh unrecognizable from its origins. Toro in particular is a good example of this. While his work used to be fraught with an edgy plot and barely understandable art, his later stuff has become genuinely beautiful, both in story and artwork. What's more, these artists have all grown without losing what made their works unique. Sentaku-sen's early art was incredibly jagged, and his later work has maintained those sharp corners and bold colors. Even Danwon, with his shifting art style, has kept his love of making music videos for well over a decade. But with all this talk about growth, you might be wondering if we've actually answered the question I posed at the start. Is there a point to all of this edge? With this wider context, I can confidently say that there is. Koidoki, as distracted as it gets in its own plot, is clearly trying to tell a story about what love, both for yourself and others, really means. All of the major figures, protagonist and antagonist, from Kawakuma to Yukari to the Lunarians, are acting out of love. Kawakuma's obsession with Patchouli is what leads her to cooperate with the Lunarians, while Yukari and the Lunarians are willing to go to whatever lengths necessary for their community. The only reason that isn't very clear is because the story constantly shifts between mediums to teach this lesson. First it's Koishi and Satori, then Flander and Ramilia, then Chirno, then the Lunarians, and finally back to Koishi. As part 19 8 out of 9 demonstrates, with a bit more focus, Koidoki could become an incredibly poignant work. The other two demonstrate this perfectly. Igyokyo's unflinching gaze on its numerous life or death situations perfectly highlights its theme of perseverance and struggle, while the very bones of Murder in Pseudo Paradise's mystery all but scream its stance on memory and nostalgia. Even with such limited resources in an already established world, pure passion and talent have created stories worth discussing for literal hours. That's part of why I wanted to make this video to begin with. Aside of the legit criticisms I have, I just want to spread the word about these passionate and dedicated artists. Sure, you may have known about Koidoki and maybe Gyokyo prior to watching, but Murder in Pseudo Paradise's most viewed video has less than 30,000 views on YouTube, and most episodes are below 10,000. For such an expertly crafted mystery, that kind of obscurity is criminal. If you share my same thirst for peak, feel free to check out any of the series I mentioned earlier, or even more I missed, and do your own part to spread the word, whether that's through your own videos or fan art. In fact, to strengthen this message, I'll go first. To really get into the fanfiction creator headspace, I've gone about writing, drawing, coloring, and voicing my own hand-drawn short as an homage to this corner of the Toho fandom. Quality be damned. I didn't have a drawing tablet, so I used pencils on paper to make do. Just to preface, I am not an artist, I am not a colorist, and I am not a voice actor, so I think you'll be able to tell that soon enough. Even so, I welcome any comments on it, positive or negative. Just please make it funny for me to read if you're going to dunk on it. Without further ado, please enjoy Reimu Hakure's incredibly boring ordinary day. Man, I really overdid it at last night's festival. My head's killing me. Why did Dotori make this loud-ass clock anyways? Now, I wonder what I should wear. That's better. Let's head out and get some fresh air. Ah, what a beautiful day. I sure hope no randos jump out of oh, of course. Who's it gonna be today? Russell. Hakure Miko! For years you have trembled in fear in anticipation of my return, but not enough. Here I am. Our rivalry ends today, and so does the Hakure bloodline. Sorry, who are you? Now. Wait, what? Don't know who you are, pal. The vicious spirit Mima, mentor of Wicked Witch Marisa? Oh, you're that crazy lady she's always talking about? Honored to meet you. Say, did you really do that to a frog? Crazy? I thought she really liked the frog balloons. Well, no matter. Prepare yourself for the battle of a light whack. Sorry, not really feeling it today. Man, what a weirdo. I feel like I do remember her from a while ago, though. Miss Hakure. Don't tell me it's that loud mother. Good afternoon, Miss Hakure. Damn, she's fast. Good afternoon, Ms. Yamazanadu. That's a common misconception regarding my name. See, Yamazanadu is my title, not my name. I think it's fascinating how mimetic culture amplifies— Yes, of course. May I ask what brings you here today? Ah, I almost forgot. I'm actually here to ask you about your internet search history. I never thought you would be such an academic. What kind of spiritual rules did you research? And how did Ms. Kurosame violate the 34th? Is this a sign she could use some advice? Or could the futa represent the two conflicting halves? Meanwhile, Reimu, you gotta check this out. Patchy just gave me these mushrooms infused with illusion magic. We are gonna trip to the moon. What a mess. This is nasty even for Reimu's laziness. Leaving her computer on and forgetting her sleeves? And what's with that stack of books? Is that me? Kirisami Marisa DP, Kirisami Marisa Oppai, Real Kirisami Marisa Voyeur, Flanchan Cream Pie, Super Horny Human Village, Kirisami Marisa Riona, Kirisami Marisa Hopeless, Kirisami Marisa Forged Cream Pie. What the hell? Hours of browsing Reimu's history later. Wow, another doujin of Alice cutting me up into pieces and eating me. At least it's not lolly this time. Ugh, just saying that degenerate lingo makes me want to blow my brains out. Oh, Marisa. Yo, Reimu. Look, Reimu, this next incident's a nasty one. We seem to be dealing with some kind of mimetic virus. Make sure you let Aya know, too. This is something we can't let the human village's children see. Well, we better head out. It's not an incident. What? I said it's not an incident. You mean that was all you? Nothing to say? Then let me go first. Do you know how hard it is to reverse engineer other people's magic? Of course not. You probably just think I swiped those moves like candy from a baby. Master Spark took me weeks of sleepless nights, Reimu, but you would just effortlessly beat me time after time, with no more effort than doing your laundry. And at the time, I could reconcile this. You were the Hakure Miko, and I could never hope to live up to your responsibility. You simply had more important things to be doing. How could I have known that while I studied and trained, you were collecting dojins, thin books, hentai? Filth is what it really is. And you've reviewed and cataloged them all for good measure. A book about doing naughty things to Mistress Remilia. 4.5 stars. Flanders should have gotten railed too. My god, Reimu, we were just at the SDM last week. Come to think of it, you never really seemed to care about any past incident, did you? It was all snarky quips and effortless dodges, no matter who we were up against. At some point, I had to wonder what you did care about. What was actually important to you? Are you telling me that all this time, this is what really mattered to you? This is what was worth your time. This is what your real passion was. This is what you want your legacy to be? Of course you have nothing to say. Why did I ever expect more? Get a grip, Reimu. This will be the last thing I write in this journal. I know it isn't the usual entry, but I frankly do not care. Relying on what's comfortable is exactly what got me into this mess after all. Earlier today, I asked myself, without the Hakude lineage, who would Reimu Hakude be? With no work ethic and an apathetic life, the only answer I could come up with was all of that damned smut. Truth be told, I'm sick of relying on my generational powers. It's about time I earn something myself. Let this be the first step of my real life, the one forged and worked for by me, not my ancestors. Burning that filth may have stung to my past self, but for the future I'm building, it should be as easy as doing my laundry. That's why the first entry of my new journal will be, "Today was an incredibly boring day. Nothing much happened."